Welcome. This is listening section overview of IELTS exam. And in this video, as usual, we will review the structure of the listening section, review the tasks and skills required, as well as how this section is scored. As a reminder, listening section is the same for two modules, the academic module and the general module. Okay, so let's begin with the section structure. And listening section is the first section that you will encounter on your IELTS exam. And it consists of 4 sections. So the first section is a fairly short dialogue on an everyday social issue. And the second one is a monologue, which is a bit more extensive. And also it covers everyday social and work context. The third section is a discussion, and there could be up to 4 participants. And usually this discussion happens in an academic context. And finally, the academic lecture, so something that you will encounter in class when your professor gives you a lecture. And usually it covers academic content on a variety of disciplines. So the level of sections increases from section 1, which is more basic, to section 4, which is a bit more advanced and covers academic context. So in general, the listening section has 40 questions, and there are 10 questions per section. However, these questions are organized in types of tasks. So for example, after the dialogue, you may be given 2 tasks. One task is in the form of a table completion, which will consist of 5 questions, and another task is in the form of multiple choice questions, for example, which will also consist of 5 questions. So there could be from 1 task to 3 tasks. It depends and varies from test to test, but usually based on the first task you can predict whether there will be the second and the third task as well. So the listening section takes 30 minutes to complete, and usually as you listen you will take notes in the question form, and then you will be given additional 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet. The good thing about the listening section is that you will be given time to review the questions in advance, and this is something very different from what other tests offer. So this is how the answer sheet will look like, where you would transfer your responses. And in the listening section, it's very important that when you take notes, it's not only about the factual information, but it's also about your ability to spell your answers correctly, which includes not only the spelling rules, but also how to capitalize, how to use articles. So a mistake in any of this will deem your answer incorrect. Now we will quickly overview each of the sections. I will present the types of tasks that you may encounter. However, we will not go into details to discuss them or to answer them. And there are additional videos where we actually answer the questions. But if you open this presentation in your classroom, you will be able to access the audio files and actually perform the task if you wish to do so. Okay, so listening section 1 is a dialogue, and as I have said already, it's a dialogue on an everyday social context, something that you will encounter when you travel abroad, when you have to buy a ticket, or when you need to find a destination. So basically these are listening comprehension skills for survival in an English-speaking context. And the grammatical and lexical level here is not too advanced. It varies from A2 to B1+, so somewhere up to intermediate level. And the dialogues are mostly of a descriptive nature. So the task types vary, and some of the more popular ones are short answer responses. And here you can see an example where you are given the leads and you need to finish the sentences with an appropriate factual information from the dialogue. The second type is table completion or completion of notes. Also, you could be provided a plan or a map and you need to fill in the blanks. So unlike in short responses, here you need to know how to scan such graphic information quickly and be able to predict what kind of information you need to focus on as you listen to the dialogue. The third type of task is multiple choice, which is a very common type of task for most of the sections actually. And again, here you will be given time to quickly scan the questions to understand the keywords and to focus your listening skills. Okay, so in general, the listening section tests the following skills: your ability to listen for details and factual information, and to do so effectively because the information and the questions are presented in a certain format. You need to be able to quickly scan those formats and follow through as you listen to the dialogues. Also, as I have said, because it's not only about the factual information that you need to understand, you have to be able to infer, you have to demonstrate your ability to spell the words correctly, to capitalize when necessary, to write addresses, to be able to spell numbers, amounts in dollars, and so on. So here are a lot of linguistical and cultural aspects of spelling that may be different from your own language, and therefore you have to know the rules as well. Okay, so now let's move on to section 2, here you can see an example of listening section 1. We will actually review it in details and cover some of the basic strategies that you would use to perform these tasks. But again, I have attached the presentation to this lesson and you can access the file and actually perform the tasks and then check with the follow-up presentation where I give the answers and actually outline the strategies. So here, the task number 1, as you can see, there are 10 questions in total. Task number 1 is organized in the form of short answer responses, where you need to complete a form. And the second one is a table completion. And then you can see that if for each task, the question actually specifies how many words or numbers you are allowed to provide, and this is very important. You have to be very careful with this kind of requirements. So the listening section 2 is a monologue, and it covers topics of everyday social issues and as well as professional context. For example, you can be offered a monologue on how to use or fix a coffee machine. What does the hiring process at a certain company look like? You may be introduced to certain software in a company and you need to be able to listen and understand how it works. So the required grammatical and lexical level here is a bit higher than in the listening section because we add professional context as well. And the types of dialogues will still be more of a descriptive nature. However, their variety is a bit wider. So you can be provided a descriptive monologue about a structure, about a diagram. It could classify information and so on. And again, the questions that we have seen in listening section 1, which we can also call universal questions, they remain. And there are some additional formats that are widely used in monologues, such as matching features, diagram completion, when you are presented, for example, the diagram of the plan of the company office building, and you have to fill out the blanks. And another type is flowchart completion, very commonly used to describe a process, for example, how the company hires people. In addition to the skills that we have seen in section 1 and which are still required here, section 2 would be a bit more advanced on the lexical resource level, as well as the structures would be a bit more advanced as well, and you have to be able to work with a wider variety of graphic information that is used for questions to be able to predict and focus your listening skills. And again, here you see an example of section 2, a monologue. So the first task type is matching features, where you have to match counselors to conditions when you would want to see them. You will have some time to review this and then focus your listening. And the second type of question for this section is table completion. And again, you have to be able to read the table so that you know what the listening will be about and what information to look for. All of these aspects we will discuss in a separate video. However, if you want to try, go ahead and access the presentation and listen to the section and follow the instructions. Okay, now on to the section 3, which, as you remember, is a discussion. And it's a group discussion with up to 4 people. It could happen in the classroom between professors and students. It could happen in an academic setting or at the university, at the conference, and so on. So the skills here, you have to be able to follow a more complex conversation, because as we know, in a dialogue, people may change the topic or they may ask questions that might not be related. So there could be a lot of destructive factors, and you have to be able to stay on the topic and again follow the main theme to be able to answer the questions. In addition to the descriptive types of dialogues and monologues that we have seen in section 1 and 2, here we also see the argumentative dialogues where people present their opinion and defend their opinion. So in section 3, this is another skill that you have to use extensively. So again, universal questions that we have seen in sections 1 and 2 remain, and questions that have been widely used in section 2 remain as well. And we have some additional ones, such as summary notes, completion, and there may be some other type of tasks such as multiple choice with several questions. And here we see an example, and here if you look at the format of the question, this is notes from the class. So probably these notes come from the literature class, where professor and students discuss a piece of writing. And listening section 4, which is an academic lecture. So the academic lectures are usually taken from the introductory courses of university disciplines, and there could be a very great variety of those. And this is something that most of international students should be prepared for. You don't need to have any kind of background, but you have to have excellent listening skills to be able to predict the structure and the organization of such lectures. So most of the lectures are authentic, and they could go up to usually they are of a proficient level, hence the grammatical and lexical resource here would go up to C2. And the variety of dialogues, as we would see in the reading section, varies from narrative to descriptive to argumentative. Questions remain the same as it was in listening section 1, 2, and 3. And as I have said, depending on the type of lecture. Usually the task creators choose certain tasks which are more appropriate, for example, for narrative texts such as historical events and biographies. It makes sense to organize questions in a chronological tables, notes completion. For descriptive type of text, you can be asked about main features, which could be in just multiple choice. Cause of fact texts would probably organize questions in flowcharts, table completion, compare and contrast as texts, use table completion, classifications, same table completion or matching features, process, structure, description, flowchart, and diagrams completion. And then we have the argumentative text, and here again notes, flowcharts, comparative tables, and so on and so forth. So you should be able to work with any kind of graphic information and use this information effectively to predict what the content of your lecture will look like. And again, there are always universal question types which exist in many of the tasks. And here, again, I'm going to show you an example of an academic lecture and the 10 questions for section 4 here. Okay, so now moving on to the scoring. As I have said, there are 40 questions in total, and for each test, these 40 questions are converted into the band scores. So there would be a certain range that would correspond to, for example, here you have to get 35 points to get band score of 8. And these tables vary slightly from test to test, and they are adjusted because the level of difficulty of some of the questions may vary. However, as you practice, this is a very good benchmark for you to use so that you know how many mistakes you're allowed to make across the listening section to be able to get the score that you need to perform at. A model listening section that you can complete to get a real experience of what it feels like, and then you can actually get at the end of the section you will get your raw score, and you can use this website. It's also attached to the task where you can automatically convert your raw score to the bands. Following videos in the listening, under the listening section, will provide an example of how we could use listening strategies to actually answer the questions offered here.